The grand chamber of the Valeri hegemony did not encourage dissent. It was designed to crush it under the sheer weight of history and architectural intimidation. High Exarch Thalcora sat upon the obsidian throne, a seat carved from the core of a dead star, suspended in the center of a room so vast that its ceiling was lost in the artificial mists of the upper atmospheric recyclers. Around him, arranged in concentric circles of decreasing elevation, sat the representatives of 1,000 conquered worlds, their species varying in shape and biology but unified by the golden collars of servitude that marked them as subjects of the hegemony. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and ritual incense, a mixture intended to sharpen the mind and dull the instincts of rebellion. But today the incense failed. Today the air tasted of copper and cold sweat. The silence in the chamber was not the respectful hush of subordinates waiting for a command. It was the terrified silence of a prey animal that has heard the twig snap but cannot see the predator. Thalcora moved his heavy, chitinous hand over the control interface embedded in his throne, his multifaceted eyes narrowing as he gazed at the colossal holographic projection dominating the center of the hall. It was a map of the galaxy, a swirling spiral of light and potential, or at least it had been. Now a spreading stain of absolute darkness was gnawing at the eastern fringe, a void where data simply ceased to exist. "Report," Thalcora's voice rumbled, the subharmonics vibrating through the floor plates designed to command obedience. "The silence in the Veil sector. Is it a transmission error? A subspace anomaly?" "High Exarch," the voice of Fleet Admiral Vrax trembled slightly, a sound that disgusted Thalcora. Vrax stood on the military dais, his reptilian scales flushed a pale, sickly gray. "It is not a transmission error. The beacons are active, but they are sending nothing. No telemetry, no distress signals, no background radiation data. It is as if the stars themselves have been extinguished." A murmur rippled through the assembly, a wave of low-frequency anxiety. The Veil sector was a fortress region heavily militarized, the gateway to the uncharted expanse. For it to go dark was impossible. The hegemony's fleets were invincible, their technology the pinnacle of 10,000 years of evolution and conquest. They were the masters of the material plane. "And the investigation fleet?" Thalcora demanded, leaning forward, his shadow falling long across the nervous delegates. "The 7th Armada was dispatched 3 cycles ago." Vrax swallowed, his throat sac expanding and contracting rapidly. "Gone, Exarch. They crossed the boundary into the silent zone and simply ceased. The quantum entanglement links were severed instantly, all of them, simultaneously." The chamber erupted. Shouts, screeches, and clicking languages overlapped in a cacophony of panic. Thalcora slammed his fist onto the obsidian armrest, a sound like a thunderclap that silenced the room instantly. "Order," he roared. "We are the hegemony. We do not panic like primitive mud dwellers." He breathed heavily, composing himself. "We need culprits. We need enemies. A force capable of silencing an armada does not appear from the ether without cause. Who has the capability? The Zignar Federation, the machine minds of the core." "They are accounted for," Vrax replied, looking at his datapad as if hoping new information would magically appear. "The Zignar are currently petitioning for trade rights, and the machine minds are in their hibernation cycle. However," the Admiral hesitated, his eyes darting to the lower tiers of the council where the minor species sat. "However, there is movement near the Sol system," Vrax said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Sensor echoes, gravimetric distortions, but surely, Exarch, we cannot consider the Terrans. Their threat status is categorized as Class 10 negligible. They are barely spacefaring. They trade in biologicals and raw ore. They lack shielding technology. Their ships are blocky, unrefined, and slow." A ripple of derisive laughter moved through the high tiers. The humans, the Terrans, the joke of the galaxy. A species that had stumbled into the interstellar community with wide eyes and open hands, accepting the lowest trade deals, occupying the most resource-poor systems, and bowing their heads when the grandiose ships of the hegemony passed by. They were considered the galactic equivalent of subsistence farmers, useful for cheap labor and food, but utterly inconsequential in the grand theater of politics and war. "The Terrans," Thalcora scoffed, a rasping sound deep in his chest. "You suggest the mud farmers of Sol have silenced the Veil sector. They cannot even terraform their own Mars without assistance. They rely on our discarded warp drives." "I do not suggest it," Vrax said quickly, eager to avoid the Exarch's scorn. "I merely report a Terran vessel, a diplomatic courier by its transponder, has requested an emergency audience. They claim to have information regarding the silence. Thalcora sat back, his mandibles clicking in irritation. A diplomatic courier, probably coming to beg for protection, sensing the fear in the galaxy. It was pathetic, but the darkness on the map was growing. It had advanced another light year since the session began. The void was hungry, and in the absence of answers, even the ramblings of a primitive might serve as a distraction. "Let them in," Thalcora commanded, waving a hand dismissively. "Let us see what the soul grubbers have to say. Perhaps their primitive superstitions have invented a god to blame for this phenomenon." The massive doors of the grand chamber groaned open, relying on hydraulic pistons the size of skyscrapers. The hallway beyond was bathed in the harsh white light of the docking bays, contrasting with the moody, ambient bioluminescence of the council hall. The delegates turned, expecting an entourage, perhaps a frantic plea for help. Instead, a single figure walked in. He was small compared to the looming alien physiology of the council members. He wore no armor, no ceremonial robes of silk and light weave. He was dressed in a simple, charcoal gray suit of woven synthetic fiber cut with severe precision. His hair was silver, close-cropped, and his face was lined with the passage of time, a concept the hegemony elites fought with genetic therapies. He carried nothing. No datapad, no weapon, no offering. He walked with a steady, rhythmic gait, the sound of his polished shoes echoing against the stone floor. He did not look up at the soaring architecture. He did not flinch at the gaze of the predator species surrounding him. He walked to the center of the floor, beneath the terrifying projection of the galaxy, and stopped. "I am Ambassador Elias Thorne of the Terran Coalition," the human said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a strange acoustic quality, cutting through the background hum of the chamber. He spoke the trade tongue with zero accent, a mathematical perfection that felt unnatural. "I am here to offer you a choice." Thalcora leaned forward, amused despite the creeping dread in his gut. "A choice, little human? You stand before the High Council of the Valari hegemony. You do not offer choices, you beg for favors." Thorne looked up then. His eyes were dark, devoid of the biological fear response that Thalcora was accustomed to seeing in lesser species. There was no shaking, no scent of terror pheromones. There was only a profound, ancient exhaustion. "The time for posturing is over, High Exarch," Thorne said calmly. "The silence you see on your map is not a glitch. It is not an invasion fleet. It is an event horizon." "Explain yourself," Vrax barked from the military dais. "What do you know of the Veil sector? That is restricted space." "We know that 17 inhabited systems have been processed in the last standard week," Thorne replied, his voice remaining flat. "We know that the 7th Armada was vaporized in 0.3 seconds. We know that the entity consuming your empire is not political. It is biological, and it is hungry." The assembly went deadly silent. The specific detail about the 7th Armada, the time of destruction, was classified. No one outside the highest military command knew that. "How do you know this?" Thalcora's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Spies, have you breached our networks?" "We have been watching the perimeter," Thorne said. "For a long time, you call us a low-threat civilization. You categorized us based on our energy output, our hull density, and our lack of aggressive expansion. You looked at our trading ships and saw weakness. You looked at our silence and saw stupidity." Thorne took a slow step forward. "You were wrong. We are not quiet because we have nothing to say. We are quiet because we are hunting." A ripple of confusion moved through the council. Hunting? The Terrans? They didn't even have plasma lances. "The entity approaching your borders," Thorne continued, ignoring the murmurs, "is an extragalactic predator, a swarm intelligence that feeds on high-energy civilizations. It tracks subspace communications, it tracks warp wakes, it tracks noise. The hegemony is the loudest thing in this quadrant. You shout your existence to the universe with your beacons, your conquests, your unshielded reactors. You rang the dinner bell." "Preposterous," a delegate from the Merchant Guild screeched. "We are the pinnacle of civilization. We do not hide in the dark like vermin." "Then you will die in the light," Thorne said. The brutality of the statement, delivered with such gentle tones, stunned the room. "The Terran Coalition has maintained a low-threat status by design. We dampen our emissions, we cloak our heat signatures, we keep our population dispersed. We built our civilization to be invisible to the hunters. We have spent 300 years preparing for the day the hunters found the Milky Way. That day is today." Thalcora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. The human was lying. He had to be. It was a bluff, a power play, but the map was still darkening. If you are so prepared, Thalcora sneered, trying to regain control. Why are you here? If we are the bait, why not let us be eaten? Surely that would suit your hunter mentality. Thorn sighed, and for a moment he looked incredibly old. Because we are not monsters, Exarch, and because once it is finished with you, it will learn the taste of this galaxy. It will not stop. We cannot fight it alone. We have the shield, but we lack the sword. You have the fleets, the firepower, the raw industrial output. But you are blind and you are loud. We are offering an alliance. We will provide the cloak. You will provide the dagger. You ask us to submit to human command, Vrax shouted, his pride stinging. To take orders from a species that still uses combustion engines for ground transport. I ask you to survive, Thorn said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, spherical device. It looked simple, metallic, unadorned. He placed it on the floor. This is a sensory relay linked to my ship, the UNS Silentium, currently holding orbit above your capital. A freighter, Vrax scoffed. We scanned it. It's a standard heavy hauler, minimal weaponry. Show them, Thorn said to the device. The hologram in the center of the room flickered and changed. It was no longer the galaxy map. It was a live tactical feed from the space above the capital planet. The massive, golden warships of the hegemony hung in defensive formations, bristling with plasma cannons. In their midst sat the human ship, a rectangular block of gray metal, scarred and ugly. Then the view shifted. The feed switched to a different spectrum, one the hegemony sensors did not use, a hyperdimensional scan. The room gasped. The gray block was merely a shell. Underneath the holographic camouflage and the physical plating, the human ship was a construct of impossible geometry. It was a singularity cage, a vessel built around a captive black hole. Its energy output, currently dampened to near zero, was reading off the charts in the simulation. It wasn't a freighter. It was a weapon of mass destruction disguised as a delivery truck. We call it the lantern technology, Thorn explained as the alien stared in horror and awe. It absorbs light, radiation, and gravity. It renders the vessel and anything near it non-existent to the sensors of the swarm. We have a fleet of these, not thousands, but enough. They are not warships in the traditional sense. They are mobile horizons. Thalcora slumped in his throne. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The humans hadn't been unable to build better ships. They had built ships so advanced they had to hide them to avoid terrifying their neighbors and attracting the swarm. The low-threat status was a camouflage, a ghillie suit worn by a sniper. The swarm is entering the inner rim, Thorn said, his voice hardening. They will be here in less than 2 standard hours. The silence travels at superluminal speeds. When it arrives, your shields will fail because they feed on the energy your shields emit. Your weapons will be useless because they cannot target what they cannot see. You must shut down your grid, total blackout. You must allow my people to deploy the Aegis network. Shut down, Vrax whispered. You ask us to blind ourselves, to power down our defenses in the face of an invasion. Yes, Thorn said, silence is your only armor now. The debate that followed was chaotic, a storm of fear and denial. But the darkness on the map kept growing. It swallowed the trade routes. It swallowed the fortress world of Canth. It swallowed the binary stars of the mystic sects. Every minute, billions of lives were snuffed out, not with a scream, but with a cessation of data. The reality of the threat outweighed the pride of the Empire. Thalcora looked at the human ambassador, standing small and resolute in the center of the chaos. He saw the truth then. The humans were not peaceful farmers. They were a warrior caste that had forgotten how to boast. They were the terrifyingly quiet professionals of the galaxy. Do it, Thalcora commanded. His voice was tired. General Order 99, total system shutdown. All fleets, all planetary grids, go dark. Exarch, the panic alone will cause, Vrax began. Do it, Thalcora roared, standing up, his chitinous armor rattling. Or we are dust. The order went out. Across the capital world, the lights died. The hum of the magnetic train ceased. The atmospheric shields flickered and vanished, leaving the planet naked to the void. Orbiting fleets powered down their reactors, drifting on thrusters, turning into cold metal tombs. The planet fell into a hush that had not been felt for 10,000 years. Only the human ship remained active, though it emitted no light. Thorn tapped his earpiece. Command, this is Thorn. The hegemony has complied. Initiate the Aegis. On the view screen, which was now running on emergency battery power, the Council watched. The gray human ship split open. It didn't open bay doors, the hull itself fractured and reconfigured, plates sliding over plates like a complex puzzle box. From within the core of the vessel, a pulse was emitted. It wasn't a laser. It wasn't a wave of plasma. It was a wave of absence. A violet sphere of distortion expanded from the human ship, enveloping the planet and the drifting hegemony fleet. Where the wave passed, the universe seemed to flatten. To an outside observer, the planet would have simply disappeared. It was being phase-shifted, tucked into a wrinkle of space-time, hidden beneath the noise floor of the universe. And just in time, the swarm arrived. They were not ships. They were tears in reality, shimmering, oily rifts that moved like schools of fish devouring the background radiation of the stars. They swept through the system where the capital had been moments ago. The council watched on the passive sensors provided by the humans. The swarm moved aggressively, thrashing through the vacuum, searching for the signal, the heartbeat of the civilization that had been there just moments ago. They found nothing. The noise had stopped. The creatures, vast, ribbon-like entities composed of dark matter and hunger, circled the coordinates. They lashed out with tendrils of anti-energy, dissolving asteroids and unmanned satellites that had been left outside the Aegis field. The destruction was absolute. Anything they touched unraveled at the atomic level. Inside the grand chamber, the silence was absolute. Thousands of alien dignitaries held their breath. They were watching death swim past their windows, separated only by a layer of human mathematics and exotic physics. Thalcora gripped the arms of his throne until the stone cracked. He realized how close he had come to extinction. He realized that for centuries, while his people built golden statues and argued over trade tariffs, the humans had been staring into the dark, building umbrellas for a rain of acid. The swarm circled for an hour, confused, agitated. Then, finding no food, no energy to leech, they turned. Like a flock of birds changing direction, they accelerated away, moving toward the next beacon, the next loud civilization in the neighboring sector, a rival empire of the hegemony. "They are leaving," Vrax whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of terror and reverence. They didn't see us." Thorn tapped his earpiece again. "Hold the Aegis steady. Let them clear the gravity well. We don't want a wake turbulence event." He turned to the High Exarch. The human's face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Maintaining the field was evidently taking a toll on the human crews. "They will bypass you for now," Thorn said. "But they will scour the rest of the galaxy. We cannot hide forever. Eventually, we have to kill them." Thalcora stepped down from his throne. For the first time in his life, he descended the steps to the floor level, placing himself on equal footing with another being. He walked until he stood before Thorn. The size difference was massive. The Exarch towered over the human, but the dynamic had shifted completely. The giant was bowing to the master. "You have the shield," Thalcora said, repeating the human's words, "but you lack the sword." "Our weapons technology is focused on containment," Thorn admitted. "We can hide a sun, but we have trouble piercing the hide of a swarm lord. Your plasma lances, however, your kinetic drivers, they are crude, but they possess the raw thermal intensity we lack. We sacrificed offense for stealth centuries ago." "Then we shall be your sword," Thalcora said solemnly. He looked around the chamber. "The hegemony is dead. The silence killed the empire we were. Today we are something else. We are the survivors." The following weeks were a blur of unprecedented cooperation. The cultural shock was immense. Hegemony engineers, accustomed to ornate, gold-plated circuitry and intuitive interfaces, were baffled by the brutal utilitarianism of human technology. Human tech was ugly, crammed with redundant safety systems, manual overrides, and analog backups. It was technology built by a paranoid species that expected everything to fail, and the aliens learned to love it. They learned that the humans called the swarm the Great Filter. They learned that Earth was not just a farming world. The entire planet of Earth was a decoy. The real human population lived in deep space habitats, hollowed-out asteroids, and mobile fleets like the one hiding the capital. Earth was kept pastoral and low-tech to fool long-range sensors, a duck blind for the species. The combined fleet gathered in the shadow of a gas giant in a leak. Fella system. It was a strange armada. The massive golden dreadnoughts of the hegemony were now painted in radar-absorbent matte black, retrofitted with human whisper drives. They looked like fallen angels, their glory stripped away to make them deadly. Flanking them were the human ships, geometric nightmares, boxes of gray silence that housed the singularity projectors. The plan was simple and terrified everyone. They would lure the swarm. They chose a dead system and deployed a scream beacon, a hegemony fusion reactor modified to pulse a signal that mimicked a thriving civilization of billions, a dinner bell ringing in the empty dark. The fleet waited in the asteroid belt, powered down, hidden under the Aegis fields generated by the human cruisers. "This is Admiral Vrax," the alien commander whispered over the hardline comms. "All batteries charged, capacitors at maximum. We have one shot at this." "Copy that, Vrax," came the voice of the human admiral, a woman named Vance. "Wait for the trap to close. Patience. They have to fully commit." The wait was agonizing. Time seemed to stretch. Then reality tore open. The swarm arrived in force. Not a scouting party this time, but a feeding frenzy. Hundreds of the ribbon entities poured into the system, rushing toward the scream beacon. They swirled around it, latching onto the reactor, draining its energy, feasting on the fake signal. They clustered tight, a ball of writhing darkness. "Now," Admiral Vance said. The human ships dropped the Aegis. Instantly, the hegemony fleet appeared on the sensors, appearing out of nowhere at point-blank range. "Fire!" Vrax screamed. 10,000 plasma lances, railguns, and antimatter torpedoes fired in unison. The darkness of space was lit by a blinding supernova of violence. The hegemony ships, stripped of their need for defensive shields, which the humans were handling, had diverted all power to weapons. The volley was cataclysmic. Caught in the gravity well of the human singularity projectors, the swarm could not phase shift away. They were pinned, and then they were burned. The plasma tore into their dark matter forms, igniting them. The entities screamed, a psychic sound that made every crew member on every ship bleed from the nose, but they died. They burned like oil on water. It was a slaughter. The hunters had become the prey. As the last of the entities dissolved into harmless radiation, a cheer went up across the fleet frequencies, a mixture of human roars and alien screeches. It was the sound of a galaxy refusing to die. In the aftermath, the political landscape of the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Valeri hegemony formally dissolved, reforming into the Galactic Concordance. The hierarchy based on conquest was replaced by a hierarchy of contribution, and at the center of it sat the humans, not as rulers but as the architects. High Exarch Thalcora, now simply Counselor Thalcora, walked with Ambassador Thorn through the gardens of the rebuilt capital. The sky was clear. The sensors were quiet. "We underestimated you because you were quiet," Thalcora mused, looking at a statue being erected in the distance. It depicted a human soldier standing back-to-back with a Valeri warrior. "In our culture, silence is weakness, noise is power." "In our culture," Thorn said, stopping to smell a violet flower that had been genetically reintroduced from Earth stock. "Silence is discipline. We have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick." Thalcora chuckled, a grinding sound. "You carried a very big stick, Elias, but there is something I still do not understand. The technology you have, the manipulation of gravity, the folding of space, it is beyond us. Beyond the swarm, even. Where did you find it? You did not develop this in 3 centuries of isolation." Thorn stopped walking. The playfulness vanished from his face, replaced by that deep, ancient look again. He hesitated. "We didn't find it," Thorn said softly. "We were given it." Thalcora stared at him. "Given by whom? The precursors, the architects?" "No," Thorn said. He looked up at the stars, not with wonder, but with a grim sense of duty. "You asked why we hold the low threat status, why we hide. It's not just to hide from the swarm." Thorn turned to the alien leader, and for the first time, Thalcora saw true fear in the human's eyes. "The swarm, the great filter, they are just the scavengers," Thorn whispered. "They are the rats that come to eat the crumbs. We hide because of what the rats are running from." Thalcora felt the blood drain from his face. "There is something else." "We are not the masters of this technology," Thorn confessed. "We are the custodians. We found a signal buried in the DNA of our own planet, a message left by a civilization that died 1 billion years ago. They built the weapons. They built the Aegis, and they left a warning." Thorn activated a small projector on his wrist. A holographic image appeared, not of a map, but of a shape, a silhouette vast enough to block out galaxies. "The swarm eats civilizations," Thorn said. "But that," he pointed to the shape, "that eats universes. It is waking up. The swarm was fleeing ahead of it. We saved the galaxy from the rats, Thalcora, but now the house cat is coming. The alien counselor looked at the human, then at the sky, which suddenly felt very heavy and very fragile. So, Thalcora said, his voice steadying as the warrior spirit of his ancestors took hold, fusing with the cold logic he had learned from his new allies. The war is not over. No, Thorne said, buttoning his suit jacket and straightening his tie, the image of the eternal bureaucrat, the calm in the center of the storm. Act 1 is over. The rehearsal is finished. Now we must prepare for the real performance, and this time we will need more than silence. Thorne extended his hand. Thalcora took it. The chitinous claw engulfed the soft flesh, but the grip was equal. Then let us get to work, the alien said, and let us be very, very quiet. Above them, the combined fleet drifted in patrol, a mix of gold and gray, watching the dark, waiting for the true shadow to fall, ready to light the lantern once more. The galaxy was no longer a hunting ground. It was a fortress, and humanity held the key.